If you're familiar with the Vampire Diaries, you know about the notoriously bad treatment of the show's only black lead, Bonnie Bennett. The poor writing of Bonnie has been talked about a lot in recent years, but I feel like the discourse only scratches the surface of how atrocious it really was. The issues with Bonnie are absolutely not exclusive to the Vampire Diaries, but they're the most blatant I've ever seen in any TV show. Bonnie Bennett is a masterclass in how not to write a black female character. The black best friend is one of Hollywood's favorite racist tropes. She's a black girl who has no love life, goals or aspirations, or any sort of personal life outside of making her white friends happy. It's literally just a modern day offshoot of the mammy, and I still keep seeing it in media to this day, even so-called feminist media. Bonnie checks all of the classic black best friend boxes, and they even invented a few more for bonus points. So, who is Bonnie Bennett? Bonnie is introduced as series protagonist Elena's best friend, with latent psychic and magical powers that eventually play a big role in the plot. She initially has a lighthearted, funny, and upbeat personality, a needed contrast between Elena's understandable depression and Caroline's mean girl neuroticism. Bonnie's arc in season 1 starts off pretty well, and then dramatically drops off. Her discovery of her powers and her relationship with her grandmother is fun to watch for the moments we get. She has genuinely cute friendships with both Elena and Stefan, and her ancestor Emily plays a critical role in the main plot. Still, in true black BFF fashion, her house isn't shown on screen, and neither is the father we're told she lives with. The lack of development of Bonnie's family is particularly glaring given how important the Bennetts are to the show's mythology and central characters. Emily Bennett was Katherine's slave. Handmaiden. Emily cast the spell that kept Katherine and the tomb vampires alive. Emily made Stefan and Damon's daylight rings. Damon promised to protect Emily's lineage in exchange for saving Katherine. Bonnie's family already has ties to the series' most important characters, and they're still paid dust except for when it's spellcasting time. It's like they went out of their way to make Bonnie and the Bennetts seem unimportant, even though they aren't, at all.
Well, your family has a very long history of keeping my secret.
After Grams is rudely killed off, we don't actually see Bonnie process her death. She just up and leaves town and stays with her dad's family in the middle of the school year, and we don't see her for 4 episodes. We don't see Bonnie grieve on screen, and so her newfound sullen personality and hatred of vampires feels really jarring and out of character. After such a traumatic experience, obviously Bonnie would change and she'd have some complicated feelings about vampires. But it's too extreme and sets her up to be disliked by viewers. She just abruptly stops talking to Elena, her best friend. We don't even get a real argument or confrontation. She doesn't even confront Stefan and almost lets him get killed by the Gilbert device. I guess the writers forgot they were friends. There's no nuance and no genuine insight into Bonnie's emotional state, just blank vampire hating. The whole Gilbert device situation is never even mentioned again, and Bonnie magically becomes undepressed by season 2, so let's just pretend it didn't happen. And finally, Bonnie's love life. There's nothing wrong with a female character being single, especially when she's just 17. But Elena and Caroline are never without a romantic interest, while Bonnie is notably boyfriendless on a show that's all about having a pretty vampire boyfriend. Leaving Bonnie out of romance leaves Bonnie out of one of the most important aspects of the series. It'd be one thing if Bonnie was single by choice, but you get the feeling that Bonnie isn't. It's implied that Bonnie receives little male attention, and she's clearly upset about that. Not a single male character in season 1 is attracted to Bonnie. The first character to call Bonnie pretty and express romantic interest in her was a villain who was just using her.
You shouldn't be so desperate. You made it too easy.
It's like we're actually supposed to believe Bonnie is less beautiful than Elena and Caroline. Are you kidding me? It's honestly sick. Kat deserves reparations. Season 2 starts with Caroline's transition into vampirism, which is when Caroline becomes a fan favorite and Bonnie becomes the fandom punching bag. I actually think Bonnie's distrust of Caroline was 100% justified, but the show is biased in favor of Caroline throughout the whole arc. She had no knowledge of the supernatural, and yet immediately starts drinking blood, feeding on humans, and using compulsion without anyone telling her what's going on. You just woke up one day wanting to drink human blood and having the ability to control minds, and you're just going with it. Girl. Caroline willingly kills a person, and I'm supposed to feel bad for her.
Do you really think I meant to kill that guy at the carnival?
Yeah, you did. Even Stefan calls her out for using compulsion for shallow reasons, something she does again when she sings her corny song. Still, just like after Graham's death, Bonnie becomes the bad guy and stops talking to Elena. Again. Bonnie has to learn how to accept Caroline instead of Caroline taking responsibility for anything. After that, season 2 is when Bonnie's magical Negro era fully pops off. At this point, they stop pretending to develop her character and she just pops in and out to do spells, and then disappears. She still continues to hold a grudge against vampires while still continuing to help them with everything, even at the expense of her own health. So her character motivations don't really make any sense. The most we're given is that it's all for Elena, or she doesn't want people to get hurt, which doesn't feel like enough. Bonnie's love life starts to develop in this season, and naturally it's a mess. The first guy to show any interest in Bonnie shows up, and it's the black guy that Caroline murders. Yay! Then there's Luca, another guy pretending to be interested in Bonnie for ulterior motives, but we finally get a true romantic relationship with Bonnie and Jeremy Gilbert. Bonnie and Jeremy might literally be the worst couple in the series. No chemistry, no logic. Jeremy is just so lame and he feels out of Bonnie's league. I feel like she's babysitting him. I know that even this wasn't planned because Bonnie and Jeremy don't even interact in season 1, and he already had 2 girlfriends prior to her. They probably knew if Bonnie continued to remain single, they'd rightly get called out for racism, so they just shoved Bonnie with Jeremy because Stefan and Damon are of course off limits, and Matt and Tyler are reserved for Caroline, so Bonnie gets Jeremy. Satisfied, blacks? The most interesting thing to happen in Bonnie in season 2 is when she meets her cousin Lucy, yet another Bennett associate of Catherine's. They both express how much they don't like getting dragged down by vampire drama, and Lucy promises she'll meet her again soon. And then we don't see Lucy until the series finale, when she was presumably dead. This show, man. Season 3 is the worst season for my sister overall. We start off strong with Jeremy cheating on her with the ghost of his ex-girlfriend after she saved his life for the first time. She has 0 storylines of her own, outside of reuniting with her absent mother, which is still connected to magical plot duties. We still haven't even seen her dad at this point. How we meet the deadbeat before the custodial parent. Since Jeremy and Bonnie are broken up in season 3, Bonnie's single and ready to mingle with her mother's unofficially adopted son. At this point, they're just bullying her. We finally see Bonnie's bedroom for the first time in the series, so win some, lose some. There's one episode in season 3 that embodies the most blatant attempt to exclude Bonnie from the plot, the Mikaelson Ball. The originals are easily the most beloved antagonists of the entire series. Honestly, maybe a little more beloved than our actual protagonists at this point. The plot in season 3 entirely revolves around them, so if they're throwing a ball, it's major plot time. Esther Mikaelson was friends with one of Bonnie's ancestors and draws her strength from the power of the Bennett bloodline. Given that the Bennetts are the reason that she's alive, you'd think she would invite Bonnie to her ball, right? Wrong. Bonnie doesn't appear in the entirety of the episode. Bonnie is in the very next episode when Esther needs her and her mom for a spell, the only thing Bonnie is allowed to do. If Esther has so much respect for the Bennetts, she even calls them her sisters, why wouldn't she invite Bonnie Bennett to her ball? It makes no sense why Bonnie wouldn't be invited. They don't even make up a fake reason as to why, she just isn't there. The only reason I can come up with is that Bonnie would have to dress up and look pretty and interact with the most important vampire characters of the series, and actually be involved in the plot outside of magic duties, which of course is against the law. The exclusion of Bonnie from anything fun or interesting genuinely feels calculated. Like, I've never seen a TV show stretch logic and move mountains to treat a character this poorly. What is going to happen if a black girl on a CW TV show has a good time? Who hurt these writers? Season 4, oddly enough, was better than usual for Bonnie. Still not enough, but I wonder if the writing for her got marginally better depending on the writer. Bonnie actually has a house now. Her dad appears in the flesh. She actually has her own storyline apart from the others, the expression arc. It was actually kind of a slay. I feel like it should have happened in season 2. It would have been a much more interesting way to develop her magic instead of that boring 100 dead witches stuff. She goes a little crazy, has some angst, and we get some of her wildest and most powerful magic moments. Good stuff. Then they kill her. At this point, we just have to laugh. Granted, she's not dead. This is the Vampire Diaries after all. But it's just more unnecessary torture, all just to bring Jeremy back from the dead. Again. They just wouldn't leave well enough alone with Jeremy. One notable thing in season 4 is Bonnie's brief interactions with Cole. They stare at each other flirtily one time, and in the graduation episode, they almost have a genuine moment. Is it very little to go on? Yeah, but the girls were thirsty for something for Bonnie, and everyone on this show dates a villain at some point. When fans started shipping Bonnie and Cole, Julie Plec was shocked and appalled that fans wanted a beautiful, strong woman like Bonnie with a murderous vampire like Cole. Hold up. Every man on this show is a murderous vampire, and Elena and Caroline stay falling in love with them. It's not about whether it's with Cole or not. It's that Bonnie isn't allowed to date whoever she wants on the show because she's too good, but we're supposed to believe Elena and Caroline are so great, and they fall in love with Damon and Klaus respectively. The show doesn't follow human morality or logic 99% of the time, to the point where it gets absurd, except for when it comes to Bonnie. I'm gonna keep it real, I still haven't watched all of season 5 onward to this day. I know what happens, and I've seen some episodes, but I can't sit through all that. In season 5, Bonnie comes back as the anchor to the other side and goes through excruciating pain, gets a great bob, and then she and Damon disappear into the void. Season 6 feels like it's the attempt at Bonnie reparations. Bonnie in season 6 onward is at her A game. We finally get a return to her more lighthearted personality in season 1, served with more maturity and angst. We get the most screen time and character development for Bonnie than at any point in the series, and Kat Graham's best acting performances. It still feels like too little too late though, because it's season 6. The glory days of TVD are long gone at this point, and everyone else is mostly past their prime except for Bonnie. It's like once they ran out of ideas for everyone else, they decided to give Bonnie stuff to do, which still has too much pain and suffering for my liking. The Bonnie-Elena link curse is so dumb, and again set Bonnie up by having Delena stands root for her death. They made Bonnie the only thing standing in the way of Damon and Elena being together. But still, not in that way, because she's too good and too noble. Again, I only watched bits and pieces of season 7, but that's when Bonnie finally gets her true love, Enzo. I don't like Enzo, and it's another obvious pair the spares move, but they had some sweet moments. Bonnie even considers vampirism for him, but she says she can't because they don't know what will happen to Elena, which is another excuse for the writers to be boring. It doesn't even make sense as to why Elena wouldn't come back if Bonnie became a vampire. They don't even explain how Elena comes back in the end. We're almost done, so whatever. It feels like the show is actually working towards a genuine happy ending for Bonnie and the love of her life. Oh, and then they kill him. They couldn't let my sister have peace for once. She destroys hell with the help of every woman in her family. Great scene, would have been better if we knew who these women actually were. She brings Elena back, and she's gonna go travel the world, starting with Africa. Yay! The end. The defining issue of Bonnie's characterization was the way the writers moved heaven and earth to make her unimportant, even when it made no sense. There's never a good reason to abuse a black character, but it's particularly bizarre when it's such an important character on paper. In the original Vampire Diaries novels, Bonnie was originally Bonnie McCullough, a white Scottish redhead. Bonnie has an actual romantic relationship with Damon, and she even narrates a book after Elena temporarily dies. Bonnie was clearly race-bended just to fill a diversity quota, but given how important Bonnie actually is in the narrative, making Bonnie the designated unimportant character was a curious choice. If Bonnie is an example of excluding a character from the narrative for no reason, Caroline is an example of including a character for no reason. I'm not gonna hide it, I'm a Caroline hater. What did Caroline actually do over the course of the series? At what point was Caroline ever truly essential to the plot? The only character less important than Caroline to the plot is Matt. What did the Forbes do again? We're told that they're a founding family, but none of them feature prominently in the story, and Liz Forbes' biggest contribution is simply being on the council. Families are a huge part of TVD's lore. Elena is a descendant of Katherine and therefore a doppelganger. The Gilbert family are prolific vampire hunters. The Salvatores are a founding family, and their relationship with Katherine sets off the plot of the entire series. The Bennetts need no introduction. The Petrova bloodline and the Bennett bloodline are tied to the Mikaelsons. The Lockwoods are a werewolf family in possession of the moonstone needed to break Klaus' curse. All of these families are essential to the main plot and interconnected. And Caroline's mom is a cop? Caroline had the most screen time of the main cast outside of the main triangle because she's nice and perky and blonde. Her struggles with her parents aren't that interesting and don't really add anything to the story. She had more screen time than Bonnie in season 1, back when she was canonically annoying and human. All the time wasted on her and Matt's musty relationship could have been given to Bonnie. The most important thing she adds to the story is Caroline, and that whole relationship honestly feels like it existed to soften Klaus. Klaus is just instantly infatuated with her for no reason. I actually think Klaus and Bonnie would have been an interesting concept. If Klaus were to be attracted to anyone in Mystic Falls, Bonnie would make the most sense. We know he likes witches, I'm just saying. The poor treatment of Bonnie is just the tip of the Vampire Diaries nonsense iceberg. The show is already extremely racist in general and has serious problems with misogyny and violence against women too. Ironically, in a show with a lot of female writers. The thing is though, just like the writing of Bonnie, TVD didn't have to be this messy. The characters in the story on paper are both really strong, and when it was good, it was good. Bonnie Bennett and TVD as a whole is a cautionary tale of what happens when racism and other forms of bigotry can hold a show back for no reason. If Vampire Diaries ever gets a reboot on HBO Max, they need to consult me.